Guys, ito yung continuation lang ng discussion natin nung last. So, ulitin ko lang, ito lang yung compilation ng lectures nila De Leon, Guerrero, Mejorada, and Rayborn. But pwede din mo kayong gumamit ng ibang mga cost accounting books and kahit management accounting books. Pwede rin kasi may mga topics din na di-discuss sa management accounting yung na topic din natin sa cost accounting. Okay, so yung i-discuss natin ngayon is yung classification of cost. So yung una dyan is cost in relation to the product. Okay, so cost in relation to the product, meron tayo dyang una ay factory cost. Pag sinabi natin factory cost, pareho lang din sila na pag sinabi nating production cost. Production cost or pwede rin natin sabihin manufacturing cost. Or inventory cost. Okay. So, pag sinabi nating factory cost, same lang din siya sa production cost or product cost, manufacturing cost, or inventory cost. So, pag sinabi natin factory cost, ang definition lang naman niya is this is the sum of direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. So, pag sinabi natin factory cost, sum of direct materials direct labor and factory overhead. Factory overhead or manufacturing overhead, pareho lang sila. Okay. So, pag sinabi natin factory cost, sum of direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. Okay. Pag sinabi natin factory overhead, the same lang sila ng manufacturing overhead. Okay. So, factory cost. So, pag sinabi factory cost, production cost, manufacturing cost, inventory cost, pareho lang sila. So, ang definition niya lang, it is the sum of direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. So, sabi din, this is the cost at which completed goods are carried as inventory and the amount that is shown as cost of sales when the goods are sold. So, pag sinabi natin factory cost, same lang din siya ng production cost or product cost, manufacturing cost, or inventory cost. So, it is the sum of direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. So, mamaya, i-discuss natin din yung direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. So, yung pangalawa dyan, so, kung meron tayong factory cost, yung second natin ay non-manufacturing cost. Non-manufacturing cost. So, ito ay panigurado ay na-discuss na sa inyo ng basic and sa partnership and corporation. So, pag sinabi natin non-manufacturing cost, ito rin ay period cost. Okay, kung sa factory cost, production cost siya or product cost. So, ang non-manufacturing cost naman ay period cost. Or, pwede rin siyang tawaging operating expenses. So, operating expenses. Okay. So, kung iyon, yung factory cost ay inventory cost, production cost, manufacturing cost. Pareho lang sila. Ang non-manufacturing cost naman ay period cost, operating expenses, or pwede rin siyang tawaging non-inventoriable cost. Okay. So, kung ang factory cost ay direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead, ang non-manufacturing cost naman ay ito yung marketing or selling expenses and general and administrative expenses. Okay, or cost. So, ito, 'di ba, na-discuss din yan sa inyo. Marketing or selling expenses and administrative expenses. So, discuss natin. So, ano yung mga example ng nasa factory cost, non-manufacturing cost. So, pag factory cost, direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. Pag non-manufacturing, marketing, and administrative expenses. So, unahin na natin muna i-discuss yung sa non-manufacturing since medyo familiar na kayo dyan. So, yung marketing expense and administrative expense. So, pag sinabi natin marketing expense or selling expenses, include all costs necessary to secure customer orders and get the finished product or service into the hands of the customer. So, since marketing expenses relate to contacting customers and providing for their needs, these expenses are often referred to as order getting and order filling costs. So, pag sinabi nating marketing or selling expenses, so yan yung mga expenses natin para makabenta. Okay? So, pag sinabi naman nating administrative or general expenses, include all executive, organizational, and clerical expenses that cannot logically be included under either production or marketing. O parang pag sinabi lang kung hindi siya kasama sa production cost at hindi siya marketing expenses, so siya ay administrative expenses. But sabi dyan ay for ano yan, executive, organizational, and clerical expenses. Okay? So, ano yung mga examples ng marketing and selling or marketing or selling expenses? So, examples are advertising expense, shipping. So, yung shipping dyan, yung freight cost. So, kung naalala ninyo, may na-discuss na sa inyo dyan na ng basic accounting nyo na freight in and freight out. So, pag marketing or selling expenses, yung shipping cost dyan ay yung freight out. Okay? Or transportation out. So, sales, travel, sales commission, sales salaries, and expenses associated with finished goods warehouses. So, sabi all organizations have marketing costs regardless of whether the organizations are manufacturing, merchandising, or services in nature. Okay? Pag sinabi naman natin administrative expenses, yung mga examples naman dyan, so include executive compensation, general accounting, secretarial, public relations, and similar expenses having to do with the overall general administration of the organization as a whole. So, as with marketing expenses, all organizations have administrative expenses. Pagdating sa classification, para hindi kayo mahirapan class. So, pagdating sa classification, unahin nyo muna, i-classify nyo muna siya kung siya ay factory cost or non-manufacturing cost. Or anuhin na lang natin, kung manufacturing cost or non-manufacturing cost. Okay? So, kapag na-classify mo na doon mo palang i-classify ulit kung siya ba ay, kung factory cost siya, direct materials ba siya, direct labor ba siya or factory overhead. Or kung non-manufacturing siya or period cost or operating expenses, so dalawa lang, marketing ba siya or administrative expenses. Okay, para mas madali siyang i-classify class, ito lang yung tatandaan ninyo. So, ulitin ko lang, classify mo muna siya kung factory ba siya or manufacturing cost ba siya or non-manufacturing cost. So, after nun, doon lang i-classify kung manufacturing, direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead. Kung non-manufacturing, siya ay marketing or admin expenses. Okay? So, ganito, para mas madali nyo siyang matandaan kung paano siya i-classify. So, let's say, lagyan natin sila, may tatlo tayong building dito. So, meron tayong factory building, meron tayong admin building, tsaka yung store. Okay? So, syempre, yung factory building, dyan ginagawa yung product natin. Okay? So, admin building, so, for administration, nandyan yung office ng president, ng accountant. Okay? So, and ito yung store kung saan natin binibenta yung product natin. Okay? So, ganito lang class. Para i-classify, so, kapag ang cost ay nandito sa building ng admin and store, so, siya ay non-manufacturing. Okay. So, siya ay non-manufacturing cost. So, kapag ang cost ay dito galing kay factory, so, ibig sabihin siya ay manufacturing cost. Okay. Okay. Para mas madali siyang i-classify class, ganito lang. So, tatlong building. Meron tayong factory building, meron tayong admin building, and store. So, yung factory building, syempre, dyan yung ginagawa yung product natin. So, yung admin and store. So, store, kung saan binibenta yung products natin. So, ganito lang. Basta lahat ng cost na mai-incur kay admin tsaka store, ito yung non-manufacturing cost. Okay. Or, yan din yung period cost or operating expenses. So, ibig sabihin, lahat naman ng cost na may incur sa factory building natin, siya naman yung manufacturing cost. Or, yan yung factory cost. Period, manufacturing cost, product cost, or inventory cost. Okay? So, ganun lang siya kasimple. So, lahat ng cost na ma-incur sa factory, so, ibig sabihin, manufacturing cost. Lahat ng cost na ma-incur sa admin and store, siya ay non-manufacturing cost. Okay? So, for example, salaries. Okay? So, let's say, salary, 100,000. So, i-classify natin siya. Yung salary, 100,000. So, manufacturing ba siya or non-manufacturing cost? So, yun muna yung natin. Classify muna natin sila kung sila ay manufacturing or non-manufacturing. Kapag na-classify na natin, then, doon natin i-classify. Let's say, manufacturing siya. So, ano siya? Direct materials, direct labor ba? Or factory overhead. So, kung non-manufacturing, selling ba siya or admin? So, ganun siya. So, unahin muna natin kung manufacturing or non-manufacturing. So, salary. So, siya ba ay manufacturing or non-manufacturing? O, isip lang kaunti. Isip lang na saglit. So, pag sinabi nating salary, manufacturing ba siya or non-manufacturing? O, pag face-to-face yan, may sasagot ng manufacturing, ma'am. Meron ding sasagot ng ma'am non-manufacturing. So, yung manufacturing, sasabihin niya, ma'am, ano po yan, manufacturing? Kasi siya po ay direct labor. Meron na masasagot, ma'am, non-manufacturing kasi siya po ay selling expenses. Meron din sasagot na admin expenses. So, pag sinabi nating salary, Siya ba ay manufacturing or non-manufacturing? Depende ang sagot. Kasi, kanino siya salary? Okay, kanino siya salary? Pag sinabi nating salary, sweldo, hindi mo makaklasify pa yan kung manufacturing or non-manufacturing. Kanino siya salary? So, pag sinabi kong ang salary na yan ay para sa accountant, okay, so salary ng accountant, so siya ba ay manufacturing or non-manufacturing? So, kung si accountant, salary ng accountant, nasan ba si accountant dyan sa building na yan? Nasa factory ba si accountant? Nasa admin ba si accountant? Or nasa store ba si accountant? So, syempre, si accountant ay nasa admin building. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, kung admin building, yan ay non-manufacturing. So, kung non-manufacturing siya, selling ba siya or admin? So, pag kasi nandito sa store, ito yung selling expenses or marketing expenses. Okay, so kung admin, yan yung general or admin expenses. So, saan ba si accountant dyan? So, si accountant ay nasa admin. So, siya ay non-manufacturing. So, recognize siya as admin expenses. Okay, so what if, pag sinabi naman natin na yung salary na yan ay salary ng factory workers. So, kung salary yan ng factory workers, classify mo siya, manufacturing ba siya or non-manufacturing. So, kung salary yan ng factory workers, nasan ba dyan si factory workers? Nasa factory ba? Nasa admin ba? Or nasa store ba? So, syempre, factory workers nandito sa factory. So, kung nasa factory siya, siya ay recorded as manufacturing. Okay. So, kaya pwede siyang, kung pag sinabi lang na salary, so pwede siyang manufacturing or non-manufacturing. Ang tanong, kanino siya salary? Okay. So, ulitin, sa ano nang tatandaan, pag nandito kay factory, recorded siya or classified siya as manufacturing cost. Kapag nasa admin or nasa store, so recorded siya or classified siya as non-manufacturing cost. Okay. So, yung manufacturing, ulitin ko lang, pwede din siyang tawag ay product cost. So, itong non-manufacturing, tawag din sa kanya ay period cost. Okay, itong manufacturing, tawag din sa kanya ay product cost. Yun, nasa taas lang din. So, ang non-manufacturing, tawag din sa kanya ay period cost. Okay. So, minsan kasi, papaklasify sa inyo, magbibigay sila ng cost dyan, sasabihin niya ika-classify kung product or period. Okay? Or kaya inventory or inventoriable cost or non-inventoriable cost. Okay? So, yun yung sa classification ng manufacturing or non-manufacturing. So, mamaya, kapag kunyari dun sa factory, ito, let's say yung factory workers, so, factory siya or factory cost siya or manufacturing cost or product cost. Diba, pagdating sa factory cost, ika-classify mo naman siya kung siya ay direct materials, direct labor, or factory overhead. So, mamaya ko naman i-discuss pa yan pag kinlassify natin sila kung direct materials or direct labor or factory overhead. Another example, rent expense. Okay, so let's say ang rent expense natin ay 200,000. Okay, so let's say yung rent expense niyan is yung renta ng building natin. Okay, so yung rent expense 200,000. Classify mo kung siya ay manufacturing or non-manufacturing. Okay, so rent expense, manufacturing ba siya or non-manufacturing? Oops, syempre, depende. O, diba? Depende kung anong yung nirerentahan natin. Kung anong building yung nirerent natin. Okay? So, kung siya ay factory building, rent expense ng factory building, so classified siya as factory expense or factory cost or manufacturing cost or product cost. Pero kung ang rent expense ay building, rent expense ng building ng admin, so ang classification niya ay non-manufacturing cost or period cost. Siya ay admin expenses. So kung yung rent expense natin ay para sa building ng store, so recorded siya or classified siya as non-manufacturing cost or period cost. So kung store yan, so di ba pag non-manufacturing ka-classify mo, kung admin ba siya or selling. So kung nasa store siya, so siya ay selling expense. Okay? So ganun lang siya. Okay? So kaya medyo madali lang naman yung classification. So titingnan nyo muna kung saan ba yung expense na yon para maklasify natin kung siya ay manufacturing or non-manufacturing. So, ang tatandaan lang ulit, basta lahat ng cost na ma-incur sa factory, siya ay manufacturing cost, siya ay product cost. Lahat ng ma-incur sa admin and sa store, siya ay non-manufacturing and or period cost. Okay. So, what if electricity expense? Electricity expense. Let's say, ang electricity expense natin ay 300,000. Okay? So, electricity expense, 300,000. So, anong classification niya? Manufacturing or non-manufacturing? O, syempre, ano yan? Fast learner kayo, di ba? So, depende. So, saang electricity yan? Okay? So, saan electricity yan? Sa factory building ba? Sa admin building ba? Or dun sa store? So, kung ang electricity ay galing doon kay factory building, kay factory, so ang classification niya ay manufacturing. Pero kung yung electricity na yan ay sa admin or doon sa store, ang classification niya ay non-manufacturing or period cost. Okay? So, gano'n lang siya. So, ang tatandaan, lahat ng cost na may incur dito sa factory ay recorded as manufacturing cost or product cost. Sa admin and sa store, classified as non-manufacturing or period cost. Okay. So, ganun lang yung classification. Okay. So, another example and last example para sa manufacturing and non-manufacturing. So, depreciation expense. Okay. So, depreciation expense. Let's say, ang depreciation expense natin ay 50,000. So, pag sinabi natin depreciation expense, manufacturing or non-manufacturing? Product or period? Inventoriable or non-inventoriable? Okay. So, depreciation expense, non-manufacturing or manufacturing or non-manufacturing? So, depende ulit saan ba yung depreciation na yan. Let's say, depreciation ng machinery or ng equipment. So, kung ang equipment ay equipment sa factory, so ang classification niya ay manufacturing. So, kung ang depreciation niyan ay ng equipment ay nasa admin, yung equipment na yon, so ang classification niya ay non-manufacturing. So, kung ang equipment na yon ay nasa store, so ang depreciation na yan ay non-manufacturing or period, so siya ay selling expense. So, ganun lang yung pag-classify, basta tandaan lang, lahat ng nasa factory ay i-classify siya as manufacturing or product or inventoriable, okay, or factory cost. Pag admin and store, so non-manufacturing or period or non-inventoriable cost. So, kung nasa admin, admin expense. Kapag nasa store, selling expense. Okay. So, ganyan lang yung pag-classify. So, yung admin and selling, so since yan ay na-discuss na din naman ng basic ninyo and partnership, hindi ko na masyadong i-discuss pa. So, ano nyo na lang kung ano yung mga examples ng admin and selling expenses. Okay. So, factory cost, ito, yung factory cost, pag sinabi natin factory cost, lahat ng cost na nasa factory, So, ano yan? Sum of direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. So, ito, discuss natin. So, ano ba yung direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead? Okay. So, dun sa susunod ninyong assignment, magbibigay ako ng classification muna kung manufacturing or non-manufacturing. Okay. Okay. Dito sa factory cost, so ulitin ko lang, pag sinabi natin factory cost, same lang siya sa production cost or product cost, manufacturing cost or inventory cost. So, ito yung sum of direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. So, unahin muna natin ay classify ano ba yung direct materials. Okay? So, pagdating sa classification ng direct material, madali lang naman. So, kapag siya ay direct, so malamang siya ay hindi indirect. So, kung siya ay indirect, so malamang hindi siya direct. So, ganun lang naman yung pag-classify. So, kaya lang, dapat alam mo kung siya ba ay direct. Kasi kung hindi siya direct, so siya ay indirect. Dapat alam mo, tandaan mo dyan kung siya ba ay direct or indirect. So, pwedeng isa lang. O, basta alam ko lang yung direct material. So, kung hindi siya nag-fit dun sa definition natin ng direct material, so, automatic siya ay indirect. Okay, so, ganun lang naman yung pag-classify. So, pag sinabi nating direct materials, sabi dyan, direct materials are materials that become part of a finished product and can be conveniently and economically traced to specific units. So, yun yung tandaan yung definition ng direct material natin. So, direct materials are materials that become part of a finished product and can be conveniently and economically traced to specific units. So, can be conveniently and economically traced to specific units. Okay. So, pag sinabi nating direct material. So, example, kunwari, nagmamanufacture tayo ng table. So, ano ba yung mga materials na kailangan natin para makapag-produce tayo ng table? So, syempre, yung wood or yung lumber. Okay, so ano pa yung kailangan natin? Nails, yung mga pako. Ano pa yung kailangan natin? So, let's say, lagyan natin ng paint or varnish. Okay. So, ano pa yung kailangan natin para makapag-produce tayo, manufacture tayo ng table? So, yung mga tools, yung hammer, yung alagare. Okay, so kasama na yan sa tools. Ano pa? Sandpaper. Okay. So, yung sandpaper, yun yung pangkinis ng wood natin or ng lumber natin. So, kunyari yan lang yung materials natin. So, ika-classify natin siya ngayon kung siya ba ay direct or indirect. So, anong tatandaan ulit? Pag sinabi lang natin direct, sabi niya dyan, materials that become part of a finished product, and can be conveniently and economically traced to specific units. Okay, so part of a finished product and can be conveniently and economically traced to specific units. So, yung wood, pag kinasifal natin siya, direct or indirect? So, pag sinabi natin wood, siya ay direct. So, pag sinabi kong DM, direct material. Okay? So, siya ay direct material. Bakit? Sabi natin, ang direct material, dapat part siya ng finished product and conveniently and economically traced sa specific product units. Okay? So, siya ay direct material. Okay? Nails, ito dito, maraming nagkakamali dyan. So, pag sinabi natin nails, yung pako, direct ba siya or indirect? So, ulitin lang natin, pag sinabi natin direct material, So, direct material. So, become part of a finished product and can be conveniently and economically traced to specific units. Okay? So, part of a finished product and can be conveniently and economically traced to specific units. So, yung nails, direct ba siya or indirect? Okay. So, pag sinabi natin nails, siya ay indirect material. O, bakit siya indirect material? O, ma'am, pag sinabi natin direct material, sabi, become part of a finished product, ma'am. Part naman siya ng finished product, Hindi ka makakagawa ng table kung hindi mo siya lalagyan ng pako. So, part siya ng finished product. But sabi dyan, pangalawa, can be conveniently and economically traced to specific product unit. So, conveniently and economically traced to specific product unit. Sa table ba, makikita mo ba yung nails? Makikita mo ba yung pako? Unless yung pako, nakaangat. So, hindi mo siya basta-basta makikita. And, yung cost niya, hindi rin naman ganun kalaki yung cost niya doon sa mismong table. So, baka sa isang table, ang magamit lang natin ay siguro wala namang 1 kilong pako yung ilalagay mo dun sa isang table. So, yung cost niya hindi ganun kalaki pag tinignan mo dun sa total cost ng product. So, siya ay indirect material. Okay? So, sa classification class, depende kung ano yung product. Okay? Depende sa product. Kasi pwedeng sa product mo ngayon, siya ay direct, pero sa ibang product ay siya ay indirect. Siya ay direct, tama. So, kung dito sa product na to, let's say yung nails ay indirect, but sa ibang product naman, siya ay magiging direct. Okay? So, depende dun sa product. Okay? So, yung paint or varnish. Okay? So, wait, but what if yung nails natin dun sa table ay made of gold? Ano na siya? Direct na siya o indirect pa din siya? So, kung made of gold yan, so maaring ang nails na natin ay direct material. Part of a finished product and conveniently and economically traced to specific product unit. So, baka mamaya, yun na talaga yung pinibenta mo, yung nails na lang pala, di ba? Kasi made of gold. Okay. So, paint or varnish. So, ang paint or varnish, direct or indirect. So, ulitin lang ulit natin. So, diba sabi lang naman natin kung direct siya, so hindi siya indirect. Okay, so dapat alam mo kung direct ba siya. So, ano ba yung direct material? Sabi natin, become part of a finished product and can be conveniently and economically traced to specific product units. Paint or varnish. Yung pintura o yung varnish. So, dyan. Pag face-to-face yan, nagkakagulo sila. May nagsasabing direct, may nagsasabing indirect. But, sa manufacturing ng table, ang paint or varnish, siya ay indirect material. Okay? So, bakit siya indirect material? Paint, ma'am, nakikita naman yun O, diba? Part siya ng product ng table. But yung cost, ganun ba kalaki? So, sabi, conveniently and economically traced. Economically traced to specific product units. So, hindi naman siya sa isang table ba, gagamit ka ng 1 galon na paint. So, hindi naman, di ba? So, siya ay indirect material. Okay? So, ganun lang yung pag-classify. But, what if yung paint, kunyari ay yung paint sa paggawa ng kotse, ng sasakyan. Okay? So, kunyari ay Innova, yung pintura ng Innova. So, paint nung sasakyan niya. So, anong kaklasify natin siya? direct or indirect. So, kapag sasakyan, ang paint ay direct. Bakit? Kasi yung paint sasakyan, hindi naman yung karaniwang pintura lang. So, wala naman siguro kayo nakita na kotse, pininturahan ng boysen. So, 'di ba? Wala namang ganun. So, ang pintura ng mga kotse, mahal 'yun. So, kaya classified siya as direct material. Okay? So, ganun lang. So, yung classification ng direct and indirect material. So, tools, direct or indirect material. So, direct material, sabi natin, become part of a finished product. Part of a finished product, may nakita ba kayo na table na naglagay ng hammer dun sa table? So, wala naman siguro, no? So, siya ay indirect material. Okay? So, indirect material. So, what if yung table, yung design niya pala, puro hammer. So, pinuno niya ng hammer. So, lahat tinadta niya ng hammer. So, ano na magiging mangyayari dun sa tools natin na yun? So, instead na indirect material, magiging direct material. So, but generally, kapag sinabi manufacturing ng table, ang tools ay indirect material. So, same with sandpaper, yung pinangkinis, sa ano siya? Siya ay indirect material. Okay, so, ganun lang yung classification ng direct and indirect material. So, pag direct, sabi natin, become part of a finished product and conveniently and economically traced to specific units. So, if ever na meron kayong question class, so pwede nating i-discuss yan pag nag-online tayo. Okay? So, kung medyo nalilito, so, or medyo naguguluhan, so take down nyo lang, then tanong nyo lang pag nag-online tayo. Okay? So, ganun lang yung direct and indirect material. So, kapag ganyan, parang daling mag-classify. Pero, minsan pag ikaw na lang mag-isa, ikaw mismo kina-question mo, direct ba? O indirect ba? Ay, teka, bakit direct? Ay, hindi. So, basta tingnan nyo lang kung ano yung classification niya doon sa product. So, kung part siya ng product and economically and conveniently traceable, so siya ay direct. So, kung hindi siya direct, siya ay indirect. So, after naman ng direct materials, so, ang i-discuss naman natin is yung direct labor. So, direct labor, tulad ng indirect materials, meron tayong direct and indirect labor. So, paano natin siya maika-classify? So, syempre, kung direct labor siya, so siya ay hindi indirect labor. So, kung indirect labor siya, so malamang hindi siya direct labor. Dun sa handouts natin, labor services or in essence, purchase from employees working in the factory. So, in addition, other types of labor are purchased from people and organizations outside the company. So, the labor costs usually associated with manufacturing include machine operators, maintenance workers, managers and supervisors, support personnel, and people who handle, inspect, and store materials. So, because these people are all connected in some way with the production process, so their wages and salaries must be accounted for as production costs. Okay? However, tracing many of these costs directly to individual products is difficult. So, to help overcome this problem, the wages of machine operators and other workers involved in actually shaping the product are classified as direct labor costs. So, sabi dyan, wages of machine operators and other workers involved in actually shaping the product are classified as direct labor costs. So, direct labor costs include all labor costs for specific work performed on products that can be conveniently and economically traced to end products. So, pag sinabi natin direct labor, so direct labor costs include all labor costs for specific work performed on products that can be conveniently and economically traced to end products. So, labor cost for production-related activities that cannot be conveniently and economically traced to end products are called indirect labor cost. O, gano'n lang naman. So, kung hindi siya direct, so siya ay indirect. Okay, so para mas madali nyo siyang matandaan kung sila ay direct or indirect. So, basta yung, di ba, kasi ang pinag-usapan naman natin dyan ay salaries or wages. Okay, so ano nga pala ang difference ng salary sa difference ng salary sa wages? Pag sinabi natin wages, ito yung merong, kunyari per hour, per unit. Okay, so pag salaries, ibig sabihin fixed. Let's say, for a month, 12,000 a month. So, ang pag wages, let's say, ang sweldo niya ay 150 per table na mapoproduce niya. So, yun, tawag doon ay wages. Okay, so, ang pinag-usapan naman natin kasi pag labor, yung salaries or yung wages. So, ang tatandaan ninyo, kung sino yung directly na gumagawa dun sa product, ang classification ng sweldo niya ay direct labor. Okay? So, example, let's say, salary ng factory workers. Okay? So, salary ng factory workers. Yung taga-cut ng wood, taga-assemble nung wood natin, and yung kinis nung table natin. So, salary nila classified as direct or indirect. So, ika-classify natin siya as direct labor. Direct. Bakit direct labor? Kasi mismo sila yung gumawa dun sa product. Okay? So, let's say salary ng machine operators. Pag sinabing machine operators, ibig sabihin, yung product natin ay ginagamitan ng machine. So machine operators. So, salary niya, direct ba or indirect? For example, meron tayong isang machine dyan. Lalagay mo lang yung wood, nandyan yung nails, yung paint, pipindutin lang ng operator. So, paglabas ay table na. So, nung ginawa ng operator, pinindot lang, nagawa na yung table. Okay, paglabas, table na agad. So, yung salary nun, ng machine operator, direct or indirect. Okay. So, sabi natin para ma-classify as direct, dapat, sabi dyan? Actually shaping the product. So, ibig sabihin, kasama siya dun sa gumawa ng product. Okay. So, ang machine operator ay direct labor. So, kahit na, sabihin mo, ma'am, hindi naman niya hinawakan yung product, pero siya yung pumindot. So, ibig sabihin, nagawa yung product, dahil pinindot niya, siya ay kaklasify as, yung salary, kaklasify as direct labor. Okay. So, what if, meron tayong factory supervisor. Salary niya. Diba pag supervisor, so nagsusupervise lang. Yeah. So, mali yan. Mukhang yung paa ng table ay hindi pantay. So, gano'n lang. So, nagsusupervise. So, direct or indirect siya? Direct or indirect? So, ang salary ng factory supervisor ay indirect labor. Kasi hindi naman siya actually yung gumawa ng product. So, nag-supervise lang siya. So, ang classification niya ay indirect labor. Okay. So, let's say, salary ng janitor. Janitor dun sa factory. So, siya yung nagwawalis, naglilinis ng factory. So, syempre, di ba sabi natin, lahat ng expenses or ng cost na may incur sa factory, recorded as factory cost or manufacturing cost or production cost. So, yung janitor, nasa factory. So, salary niya, direct or indirect? Direct or indirect? Syempre siya ay indirect labor. Di naman siya gumawa ng table. Okay. So, ganun lang yung pagka-classify pagdating sa direct or indirect labor. Okay. So, ganun lang yung direct and indirect labor. So, susunod dyan ay factory overhead. So, ano man yung factory overhead? Pag sinabi natin factory overhead, pareho lang din yan sa manufacturing overhead. Okay, factory overhead or manufacturing overhead. Pag sinabi naman natin factory overhead or FOH or manufacturing overhead, so FOH or MOH, manufacturing overhead or factory overhead. Pag sinabi natin factory overhead or manufacturing overhead, lahat ng indirect materials and indirect labor ay classified as factory overhead or manufacturing overhead. Okay? So, kaya pagdating dito, mas madali na mag-classify kung factory overhead siya. Bakit? Pag in-classify mo, let's say sabi mo, okay, let's say sabi natin, salary ng factory workers. Diba, kaklasify natin kung siya ay manufacturing o non-manufacturing. So, saan ba yung factory workers? Nasa factory. So, siya ay manufacturing cost. So, kung manufacturing cost siya, tatlo lang pagpipilian, direct materials ba siya o direct labor? So, siya ba ay direct material? So, salary ng factory worker, hindi naman siya material. So, siya ba ay direct labor? Labor siya kasi salary. Okay, direct ba siya? So, pag sinabi ng direct, ibig sabihin ay, actually, siya yung naggawa ng product. So, factory worker salary, so direct labor siya. So, ganun lang yung classification niya. So, pag sa factory overhead, ganito naman, let's say, salary ng factory supervisor, yung kanina. So, salary ng factory supervisor, nasa ng supervisor, nasa factory. So, pag kinasify kung manufacturing or non-manufacturing, siya ay manufacturing. Kung manufacturing, direct material ba siya? So, salary yan ng factory supervisor, hindi siya material. Labor siya, yes, pero direct ba siya o indirect ba siya? So, hindi naman siya kasama dun sa naggawa mismo ng product, ng table. So, hindi siya direct labor. So, kung hindi siya direct labor, siya ay factory overhead. Okay? So, basta lahat ng indirect materials and indirect labor, ang classification niya ay factory overhead. Let's say yung nails. Okay, so yung nails, yung cost ng nails, so manufacturing ba siya or non-manufacturing? So, syempre, nasa factory siya. So, siya ay manufacturing cost. Kung manufacturing siya, direct material ba siya? Hindi. Material siya, pero siya ay indirect material. So, kung indirect material siya, siya ay classified as factory overhead. Okay. So, gano'n lang yung pagka-classify. So, actually, tatlo yung naman ng factory overhead natin. Pwede siyang indirect material. Pangalawa, pwede siyang indirect labor. And yung pangatlo, pwede siyang other costs. Okay, other costs. So, basta para magawa yung product, so, na-incur siya. So, classified siya as factory overhead. For example, depreciation ng factory machine. Okay? So, yung machinery sa factory, pag kinasify, manufacturing o non-manufacturing, siya ay manufacturing kasi nasa factory siya. So, kapag kinasify siya, depreciation ng factory machinery, so, machine ng factory, so, direct material ba siya? Hindi. Direct labor pa siya, hindi. So, automatic siya ay factory overhead. So, pag pinaklasify sa inyo, kung factory overhead ba siya, indirect material ba siya, indirect labor ba siya, or, yung pangatlo, other cost ba siya. So, depreciation ng machinery natin, indirect material ba siya? Hindi. So, siya ba ay indirect labor? Hindi. So, ibig sabihin siya ay other cost. Okay, so, ganun lang yung pag-classify kung factory overhead or manufacturing overhead. So, sabi dyan, manufacturing cost that cannot be classified as direct materials or direct labor cost. So factory overhead costs are varied collection of production-related costs that cannot be practically or conveniently traced directly to end products. So this collection of costs is also called manufacturing overhead or factory burden or indirect manufacturing costs. Okay? So, pwede siyang maklasify as indirect materials, indirect labor, or other indirect factory costs or other costs. So, ano yung mga indirect materials? Ayan. So, nails, kasama yung small tools. So, yun yung mga classification na indirect, tsaka indirect labor, yung mga na-discuss natin. So, yung kung hindi mo siya maklasify kung direct material or direct labor siya, pero nasa factory siya, so, ang cost na yun ay recorded or classified as factory overhead or manufacturing overhead. Okay, class. Yang direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead, yan ay importante kasi kasama yan sa computation ng cost of goods sold. Okay? So, yung cost of goods sold under ng manufacturing. Okay? So, sa ngayon, ito muna yung formula na kailangan yung matandaan. Okay? Sa susunod, after natin ma-discuss lahat ng theory part dito, so, i-discuss na natin yung formula ng cost of goods sold under ng merchandising and manufacturing. So, ngayon, ang tandaan nyo muna, ang direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead, pag inad silang tatlo, ang tawag sa kanila ay total manufacturing cost. Okay? Manufacturing cost, pwede rin total production cost or total inventoriable cost or total product cost. Okay? So, basta yung sum ng direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. Okay? Pag sinabi nating direct materials and direct labor, okay, pag direct materials plus direct labor, ang tawag naman dito ay prime cost. Okay? Pag sinabi naman nating direct labor plus factory overhead, ang tawag naman dito ay conversion cost. Okay? So, conversion cost. So, tandaan nyo, direct materials and direct labor equals prime cost. Direct labor and factory overhead equals conversion cost. So, pag dito sa formula natin, pag kinumbine tong dalawa, direct materials and direct labor, ito yung prime cost. PC prime cost. Ang direct labor and overhead, ito naman yung conversion cost. Okay? So, importante yan. Bakit? Kasi sa susunod, may mga formula na sasabihin lang, let's say, yung prime cost niya amounted to 100,000. So, ibig sabihin yung prime cost na yun yung sum ng direct materials and direct labor. So, pag kinumbine sila, ang total nila 100,000. So, kung hindi mo alam yung prime cost, so, hindi mo maano kung ano ba yun, kung saan ba yun. Okay, so kung pag nilagay natin yung mga amount dun sa formula. Okay, pag sinabi natin conversion cost, direct labor, and factory overhead. Ang tandaan nyo lang ganito, ano ba yung kailangan para makapag-produce ng product? Primarily, kailangan natin ng direct materials and direct labor. Siyempre, hindi ka makakagawa ng product kung wala kang material at kung hindi mako-convert, diba? Kung walang magko-convert, walang labor, hindi ka makakagawa ng product. Pag sinabi naman natin conversion cost, so paano naman mako-convert yung product? So kailangan ng direct labor and factory overhead. So yun naman yung conversion cost. So pag tinanong sa inyo, prime cost plus conversion cost equals total manufacturing cost. True or false? So true or false? Prime cost plus conversion cost equals total manufacturing cost. So, trolls, kalahating true, kalahating false. So, pag sinabi natin ganyan, ang sagot dyan ay false. Bakit? Pag kasi sinabi yung prime cost, direct materials plus direct labor. Pag conversion cost, direct labor plus factory overhead. So, kung inad mo silang ganyan, so total manufacturing cost ba yan? Hindi. Bakit? Kasi madoble yung direct labor. So, ano lang ba yung formula natin sa total manufacturing cost? Yun lang. Direct materials plus direct labor plus factory overhead. So, dito, false siya kasi nadoble yung direct labor. Okay? So, ito ay false. So, bakit kailangan yan, class? Kailangan yan pati sa pag-compute. Okay? For example, sinabi niya, ang prime cost daw amounted to, sabi, sa formula, ang prime cost ay 100,000. Okay? So, 100,000. And, yung direct materials daw amounted to 40,000. Okay? And, ang sabi, ang conversion cost daw ay amounted to 70,000. Okay? So, ang tinatanong sa inyo, magkano daw yung factory overhead? So, yan lang yung given. Prime cost amounted to 100,000. Ang direct materials daw ay 40,000. Ang conversion cost daw ay 70,000. So, ang tinatanong, magkano yung factory overhead? So, kapag ganyan, so ano lang yung gagawin natin? No. Paano ba yung formula natin? Diba ang formula lang naman, direct materials, direct labor, plus factory overhead equals total manufacturing cost. O, ganyan na siya. Yeah. So, sabi niya, ang prime cost daw, so ito yon yung direct materials saka direct labor amounted to 100,000. Okay? So, ang direct materials daw ay 40,000. Okay? So, ang conversion cost daw, ito yon direct labor and factory overhead amounted to 70,000. So, kung ang tinatanong, factory overhead, ito, magkano ang factory overhead? So, kung ang prime cost is 100,000, so meron ka ng direct materials na 40, so it means, ang direct labor mo ay 60,000. So, kung 60,000 ito, okay, ang factory overhead natin, ang hinahanap, ang conversion cost daw is 70,000. So, kung may 60 na doon sa direct labor, pag sinabi natin conversion cost, sum of direct labor and factory overhead. So, it means, ang factory overhead natin ay 10,000. So, ganun lang siya. So, kaya kailangan alam kung ano yung prime cost and conversion cost. So, ang prime cost ay direct materials plus direct labor. So, ang conversion cost ay direct labor plus factory overhead. Okay. So, puputulin ko muna dito yung discussion. So, continuation ulit nung natitirang mga classification ng costs.